For thousands of years, astrology was the royal science of the most advanced civilizations. It was a living dialogue between the priest, the king, and heaven itself. This same civilization that created mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and the calendar had the advanced technology to decode the blueprint of your soul given to you at birth, and then it was taken away. So, what was lost, who took it, and why it's being restored right now for the leaders and the advanced healers and light workers who were born to help guide humanity into our next era of evolution is what I'm here to reveal. I am Antoinette. I practice Babylonian astrology. I practice astrology as it was when astrologers were priests who were the primary guide for the king, circa 5500 BC, observing the living three-dimensional celestial sphere outside with feet on the ground, eyes on the sky, with the ancient calculations, and studying the original manuscripts of Sumer, Akkad, Mesopotamia, and ancient Greece, those ancient manuscripts that were interpreted by scholars, but they were written by the astrologer of the ancient times. So when the scholars decoded these ancient manuscripts, they still didn't know what it said because it was written by an astrologer for an astrologer. So just in the past couple of decades, that astrologer has finally shown up to decode those ancient uh, manuscripts, those ancient languages that were kept in the scholarly libraries and the museums and in basements of religious empires. So I am here today as one of the rare few practicing at this pure level. And I'm here because this era that is upon us that we're entering into requires it. So picture this: Babylon, the most advanced civilization the ancient world had ever created. And at the center of this civilization stood the ziggurat, a temple tower rising above the city. And at the top of the tower, priest astrologers took shifts watching the sky to document everything that they saw in heaven and everything that was happening below. So they knew from thousands of years of documented observation that to set the world right, we do what is best according to heaven. As above, as it is above, so it is below. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So we are a mirror. So the ancient astrologer did not read a chart on a screen or any other 2D image. He was the astronomer practicing and reading the living heavens, the 3D celestial sphere. He was tracking the heliacal rises of the planets and the stars, such as the moment that Venus emerged from under the sun's rays after months of invisibility, because he knew that her birth into a new cycle, when he could actually see it with his eyes on the sky at his latitude, carried the omen for what was to come for their civilization. He meditated on and he documented the color, her luminosity, the extinction of the atmosphere, and all of the other meaningful omens in the entire picture of the living sky at her first appearance. So, and this is so that royal courts were prepared to take correct, aligned actions for the best outcomes for the whole kingdom, for the crops, for the harvest, for the animals, for the right legacy moves, for the right partnerships, for coronations, for marriages, for the health and the wealth of the kingdom. They knew that timing was everything, and the royal astrologer dedicated his life to this purpose. And the king did not make a move. He did not launch a war, sign a treaty, arrange a marriage, even choose a medicine or appoint a new clergy to the court or crown a successor without the precise counsel of the royal astrologer. So the queen of all science was fully trusted as the pure precision intelligence by the most powerful empires on earth. And this sacred science, it was alive in Sumer and Akkad and Mesopotamia and ancient Greece. It was the advanced technology for civilizations that understood the sky was a living GPS system, and it was created by God Himself. It was encoded in the movements of the stars and the planets, the precise timing, purpose, and destiny of every soul, every leader, every empire, every kingdom born under them. So, and back then you had to, if you wanted your star map, your royal star map, you had to go into the royal library to find it. That's where it was kept. It was every moment was documented in time, as above, so below, and these first tablets, these first documentations, the Babylonian cuneiform tablets that were written by the first Hermes, is documented to be Hermes Trismegistus, have survived from as far back as 7,500 to 5,500 BC, when at that time, so I'm going to talk about the processions of the ages a little bit and what was prevalent, what energies were prevalent in those times. So at that time, the vernal equinox was near the fixed star Sirius. And this is the brightest star in heaven, in our sky. It is the star that determines the precession of the equinox, the equinoxes and the cycles of the ages, the over 2,000 year ages. I think it's 2,200 year ages that follow along the constellations that are on the ecliptic, that divide the ecliptic into 12. So that would be the 26,000 year precession of the equinoxes. So at that time, the vernal equinox was conjunct the fixed star Sirius. And so that's the star that dictates the movement of the ages. So whenever we're moving towards Sirius, it's a beautiful bright blue white. And then apparently we're evolving through those ages as documented. And whenever we're moving away from it, it's more the larger age of like a dismantling and dissolution. So everything, we're here for our learning, right? So we have the light and the dark, and it's all in contrast and to be kept in balance for our learning, right? So at this time, so that fixed star Sirius, it is a little bit more about that. I just want to stress how important that star is, because this is the star all ancient texts also would say that the greatest spiritual leaders came from this constellation, the Sirius the Sirius is it's actually more than one fixed star, but they came from Sirius. So they say that Christ came from Sirius, and other benevolent spiritual teachers, and a spiritual teacher to lead us into from one age to the next would come. So that's how important the ancients and the modern spiritual teachers and masters looked at this star to be that powerful. So, um, so they were the first written celestial records in human history, inscribed with extraordinary precision. It came about during that time, whenever the vernal equinox was with the fixed star Sirius. Okay, so and then they were, after this, they were locked just more recently into the basements of museums and religious empires, waiting to be found and decoded again at the shift of the ages. So that was during the age of Gemini, and then we went through the golden age of Taurus, and then we went through the age of Aries, and these records were still prevalent then, but they went into hiding during the age of Pisces, and that's the age that we are moving from as we move into the age of Aquarius. So only in recent decades this decoding has happened. The original Mesopotamian texts only recently translated by the only living astrologer who spent decades uh, reveal translating them, revealed that Mesopotamia was not polytheistic in the way that later scholars assumed. Okay, so during the age of Pisces, we kind of went into um, it was kind of a more, I would say, in Steiner terms, he would call it more Luciferian, so not connected to reality so much, and uh, in a way that we can give our power away to the institutions. Um, so then a lot's being revealed now as we come into the age of Aquarius. So um, anyway, so in ancient studying of these ancient manuscripts reveal that Mesopotamia was not polytheistic in the way that later scholars of the Piscean age assumed. The many gods were organized principles of the one. They were emanations, they were fractals of a single divine intelligence expressing itself through the pictures on the living sky, through the actual um, beings on the living sky. God is one, man is in the image and the likeness of God. The earth is an image of heaven. What happens in heaven at the same time happens on earth. And this was the worldview of the first astrologers. It was the original unified science of creation. But between those ancient temples and today, what is most potent and powerful was interrupted and obscured, like I said, through the age of Aries and Pisces, that interruption and um, dissolution and the dilution happened. And at the shift of the ages from that age of Aries into Pisces, um, Constantine fused the church and the Roman Empire into a single power structure. So this was in 313 CE. And then by 380 CE, Theodosius made Christianity the official state religion. And with it came the centralization of all divine authority. So this is when we were officially into the age of Pisces. The church positioned itself as the sole channel between God and humanity. And I want to tell you, I spent many weeks, many months on the Turkish Mediterranean last year. And I saw with my own eyes how the remains of the old temples still stand as witness to a world that was broken apart, buried, and then later only partially restored, and is in the town of Side. the City Antalya, Turkey, the old temples of Apollo and Athena, they still stand as only fragments of a world that was shattered, repurposed, and only partially restored. And very magical place. Um, the loss, the loss happened through many countries and cultures, and as empires and religions consolidated power, many traditions were pulled away from the direct counsel of heaven. The temples were burned, universities were reshaped, and even living astrological lineages began drifting away from the real celestial sphere into the 2D formulas. And the truth is that heaven had always spoken directly to those who could read it. Priest-astrologers were a direct channel between heaven and the leaders that they served. But if the sky could speak directly to kings and to individuals, then the institution could not maintain exclusive control over divine counsel. And the royal science, so the royal science was pressed into institutional control. The practitioners of pure astrology were forced to submit, forced um, to bend what had been proven and sacred over thousands of years to the demands of patriarchal power structure that had absorbed the empires. And this is when also astrology was removed from the universities. And what did survive in the public sphere was gradually reduced. It was diluted first into philosophy, then it was diluted into the simple surface personality, and then into entertainment. And then we had the scientific revolution of the 1600s, which completed the separation. So astronomy was made mathematically legitimate, and astrology was then separated from astrology and made culturally suspect, of course. Because, I mean, if they're not matching, astrology and astronomy aren't matching, then, I mean, we can see the pure living union between sky observation and spiritual intelligence was severed. So this created a disconnection from nature. Um, or it contributed to the disconnection from nature. If we're only staring at what's 2D, then how do we know what's real if we're not observing the living sky? So over time, the royal science was separated from the living sky, absorbed into institutions of power, and then reduced in the public mind to a simplified tropical language that it no longer carries the full astronomical intelligence of its origins. So this now diluted royal art moved further from temple observation and into mass culture, and it was pulled into a world increasingly organized around spectacle, vanity, and looping psychological patterns. So the culture, a culture that taught people to trust surfaces, performance, and mediated images, made it harder to perceive the real sky, the real timing, and the true spiritual hierarchy. And disconnected from the living sky, then by 2D based abstraction, by institutional fear, by a culture that rewarded image over initiation, a culture that rewarded convenience over precision and personality over cosmic order. It it became easier to perform astrology than to be a practitioner of it. It became safer to be a parrot and regurgitate what everyone else was saying, just like we hear all across the media. Then it was safer to do this than to be a priest or a priestess. And then what went viral was what was easiest to dilute for public consumption. So the tropical zodiac, it's a fixed two-dimensional image overlay that's projected onto the celestial sphere regardless of where the stars actually are. And this became the mainstream version because it was more convenient and acceptable. It was easier um, to translate from the 2D. It was useful to mark the seasons, but the actual living sky itself was removed from astrology. This is when astrologers became the laughing stock of astronomers. Astrologers don't make any sense in this modern day to astronomers. There's a complete separation here. And when when a spiritual authority is centralized and when culture is driven by spectacle, people lose contact with direct observation, direct knowing, and direct relationship to heaven. And I know what it feels like to be completely transformed by the pure connection to heaven, because it was this difference between living moored and finally receiving the precision that clarified my mission and my purpose. So before I found Babylonian astrology, I did dabble in the modern Western astrology, but I had a vision. It was a very visceral, deeply felt vision that began to unfold from memory, even, it felt like. And I had already mastered the healing arts, holistic medicine, plant medicine, natural healing, energy medicine, guiding people towards radiant health and personal evolution and development so that they could live fully in their sovereignty and in their freedom with much success. But what was missing was the timing, the cycles, the constitution, and that the invisible environmental field in which the human lives and heals. Um, like really, timing is everything, day by day, hour by hour, and I really pay attention to that now, and that keeps um, putting two and two together, the plant world, the earthly world with the heavenly world, and really connecting. It solves a lot of problems, connecting these cycles, connecting the natural cycles together. And this is when the human lives and heals fully. And then in just moments of discovering royal astrology, the Babylonian astrology, my entire life changed. My true path was it was completely illuminated before me. I dove into study under the only living astrologer who spent decades decoding these unspoken languages. And I studied the stars as I still do, as living bodies with phases, appearances, disappearances, and precise omens tied to real, observable, astronomical sky events. So the pure astrology showed me the blueprint that God wrote for the true expression of my soul at birth. And from that moment, I understood that my responsibility to those that I serve, I understood this, and I understood the responsibility to the lineage itself, to the ancestors of the planet who were more connected to God and to nature and and access to the pure first downloadable codes of who they were, without all of the noise that we have today separating us. And because the astrologer who's not looking at the real sky is not carrying the pure transmission. The law is feet on the earth, eyes on the sky. That's the embodiment of royal astrology. And if we're not watching the real sky as astrologers, we could consult. This happens a lot. We consult someone on a wedding date. We help them plan the right wedding date, while Venus, the goddess of love, is invisible in the underworld. And then that's every single time. I see it every single time without fail. This is the equivalent of medical malpractice. We're doing the world a disservice by not looking at the real sky and watching what's most powerful and what's most important, and remembering what's most powerful and what's most important. And this is why I practice in the old way. This is why I study the original manuscripts. This is why I'm here. And here is what the modern mainstream society does not know, and what the ancient Babylonian sidereal calculations make precise. Okay, so the living sky moves. It moves 1 degree every 72 years. The vernal equinox point shifts backwards through the sidereal zodiac. And this is what the ancient priest astrologers observed and recorded for millennia. The tropical overlay can never see this. And right now, the spring equinox appears at 5 degrees Pisces. It's in the real observable sky. And we're still finishing up in the age of Pisces. The official turn of the age, when the vernal equinox reaches 0 degrees sidereal Aquarius, arrives in the year 2372. And this is according to the precise Babylonian calculations that I use in my work, based on the 4 pillars of the royal stars. And just as we see the dawn of a new day before the sun officially arises, the dawn of the Aquarian age has already been lighting the world for over a century. So the Aquarian age is already here. There's no denying it. Like the spiritual teachers of the late 19th century and early 20th century, Rudolf Steiner, Bien Seduno, and others, they saw it. And they understood that humanity was entering into a new era, the era of knowledge and information spreading globally, and of an era of spiritual responsibility and sovereignty, and of liberation from institutions of fear and intermediary control. So the dawn was already here. The new era had not yet risen, but the light was bright, just like the day is bright before the sun even reaches the eastern horizon. And it's in this dawn, this precise window of civilization awakening, that the ancient manuscripts have been decoded. In those first pure morning rays of a new millennia. And the royal science has been restored now. So the living Babylonian astrology, it's available again, specifically in the perfect timing for the heart-centered leaders, founders, visionaries, those lightweight way showers and light workers who are advanced and who are meant to lead humanity today. And the power now in this shift of the eras is transitioning from the institutions to the people, to the community, to even those who are in their priestly authority and their spiritual authority. through the service-centered leader who is connected to their purpose. And even though the royal astrology was hidden, it's never stopped governing the outcomes of empires. So, for example, J.P. Morgan timed his investments with his astrologer and created a dynasty. Nancy Reagan scheduled presidential meetings around cosmic safety windows. Francois Mitterrand consulted before the Gulf War negotiations. Steve Jobs rebuilt Apple timed under his aligned cosmic reset. And they were not using modern pop astrology. They were guided by the precision science that secures the winning strategy, the same science that was alive in the most powerful royal courts of Babylon, Persia, Ottoman Istanbul, ancient Greece. And actually, in the Ottoman court of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Sultan who built the greatest empire the world had ever seen at the time, no act of power moved without the royal astrologer's calculation. His chief astrologer watched for one celestial event above all others. And this was the heliacal rise of royal stars and planets. This is documented. When there was a specific astronomical appearance above the horizon before dawn, the Sultan would be advised to act. And these precise calculations of Venus's appearance actually is documented to have guided the timing of Suleiman's marriage to Hurrem Sultan, who, and this was a union so cosmically aligned that it stabilized the entire empire. It forged peace with Poland. It ignited the Suleiman golden age of poetry, architecture, justice. So when love and timing align, destiny stabilizes, and they paid attention. The kingdom moved accordingly. And centuries later, the role of the royal astrologer still remains in private council of modern kings, founders, empire creators. I've personally witnessed magnificent results from leaders who entered my world. For example, one client reversed months of losses and generated 90 grand in new sales after a single precisely timed launch that I guided him through. Another leader resolved a multi-year court battle. It was resolved in his favor within 2 weeks after I advised him. And then he met his future wife only a month later. And they're happily married with babies now. Another founder revived her health and her energy after years of exhaustion from chronic illness. A master healer came to me, and she finally stopped attracting unavailable partners, and she entered a relationship that supports her vision and her values. And I mean, there's so much. Whenever you're aligned with your soul blueprint and following your proper GPS system, then I mean, you can go from health collapse, relationship deterioration, and failures to thriving in vitality and and in alignment in all areas of life. So, and these are with the coordinates already written in your royal star map. So this is what I've witnessed happening when your life is finally operating in alignment with heaven's blueprint. God's higher plan always exceeds your boldest desires and brings ultimate fulfillment. This is my magic. Most of my clients keep me on retainer long term as part of their team, but the way to enter my world is with the initial Royal Star Map activation. This is where I decode your original star map that God wrote for you at your birth, and I reveal your precise coordinates of power, when to launch, when to rest, when to pull back, portals of possible danger, how to stay protected, when to invest, um, and what has been blocking the next level of fulfillment, and how to release that, dissolve that, uh, to change luck and opportunity. So this is not for everyone. I am one of the rare few on the planet practicing at this level of pure royal astrology. And but if you're a leader, if you're a founder, a visionary, a healer, um, any of these things who are helping to steward our planet uh, into our next levels, who no longer wants to navigate alone, but with the highest counsel available, straight from heaven, then you'll want to go to royalstarmap.com to begin. I'll leave it in the description below. And remember that heaven's blueprint for your most magnificent life was written for you at your birth. So it's your birthright to have access to that. And God knows better.